I'm Gwen Edwards, and welcome to another edition of Our Lives. Well, do you want to hear something frightening? I mean, truly scary. We are in the middle of a Holocaust. This Holocaust is killing millions of people in Africa as well as people of color right here in the United States, and most of the world is just looking the other way. My guest today did not look the other way. She documented it in her film about HIV/AIDS entitled Why Us? Left Behind and Dying.
We have more HIV because of our African ancestry. We have more HIV because of our secrecy and shame about the virus, our homophobia, and the difference in power between men and women in our communities.
Claudia Pryor is the founder of Diversity Films in Stanford, the production company behind Why Us? Left Behind and Dying. Claudia also is a journalist, producer, director who has won many, many awards for her documentaries. And welcome, Claudia.
Thank you.
Now, I actually had to force myself to look at the entire 90 minutes. I was doing it in the newsroom. I was hoping somebody would call me away for a phone call, something would come up, but I had to force myself to watch this. Why did you make this documentary?
Because I think that we really need to understand why HIV rates are so disproportionately high in black populations, in black America as well as in Africa. And people think they know about what's going on in Africa, but many people
don't have a clue.
Don't have a clue, and don't have a clue about what goes on in black America in terms of the rates of the virus being so disproportionately high.
Okay. Give us a little background about this documentary. You chose Homewood, Pennsylvania, Westinghouse High School, and for the record, I am a graduate of Westinghouse High School. But what surprised you most while making this documentary and interacting with this group of students?
That when I first started out, it took me 7 years to get this done. It took 2 years just to raise the money. I got a great deal of funding from the National Institutes of Health, a program inside that called SEPA, and it took 5 years for the actual production. But one of the things that the grant required me to do was have an educational component. I started off just as a filmmaker, but when I had to have this educational component, I decided I'd find a high school somewhere in the United States, and I wanted it to be all black, I wanted it to be inner city, and I wanted it to have the kind of kids who are likely to fall through the cracks of American society. And I ended up in Pittsburgh, literally, because my college roommate lives in Pittsburgh and is was able to help me connect with the school district there. And they allowed me to do this work inside Westinghouse High School. That's how I got there. And the most surprising thing was that the students became the core of the story. The most surprising thing was we let go of our need to do the interviews ourselves as filmmakers, and we gave it to them, because they really responded to being the researchers. They responded to being the ones who elicited the information, because that was powerful for them.
All right, so let's talk about some of the misconceptions and things that people just don't realize, that most people of color have a genetic variation that makes us more susceptible to HIV/AIDS. Talk about that.
That was a study that came out of the University of Texas San Antonio Health Science Center in 2008. In the summer of 2008. All of this time, people have been assuming that it is drug use or it's sexual behavior or all of that, and those are factors, but they absolutely are not the only factor.
And it's the same gene variation that gives us a higher rate of sickle cell.
It's the same kind of gene variation. Mm-hmm. Actually, scientists discovered this on one single gene. It's a gene that everybody has, but sometimes it's formed in one way in one population and another way in another population.
Okay, and very quickly, we want to talk about two other things. The fact that people in the minority community, people of color, are more likely to use condoms, which a lot of people did not realize was the case.
I didn't realize that either. One of the epidemiologists that I brought to Westinghouse to have my students interview said that that's what his scientific research shows. The kids were amazed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the fact that there's an out-of-balance sexual network in minority communities, that there are fewer men, more women, and men can be a little more dominant in the relationship, causing women to be a little more risky in the relationship.
Absolutely. I think what people don't realize that demographics, simple demographics, help this virus flourish in our community. Because, frankly, so many men have been taken to prison over the war on drugs. That leaves behind the male-female balance is absolutely out of balance in many black communities. So one man can have several girlfriends and therefore, or several partners, and he has the power, it doesn't mean he necessarily does it, but he has the power to say, if you insist on a condom or if you insist on being faithful, forget you.
I'll go to the next.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've got to take a break, but still to come exclusively on Our Lives, there is a deep, deep mistrust by people of color of medical treatment and testing, and more on the HIV/AIDS conspiracy theories when Our Lives continues.